talk about is it's the writing of another Israeli by the name of Chana Yablonka. Chana Yablonka is a prominent Israeli historian who has studied the Holocaust, but more importantly, she studied Holocaust survivors. And one of the things that she's saying is this, that the popular media in Israel has described the survivors as miserable, as victims, as in all sorts of negative ways. Recently on Israeli television they show a Holocaust survivors who hasn't got enough to eat, who is alone. And she is arguing very, very strongly against that portrayal of Holocaust survivors. She is saying, she's arguing, she's researched it, that the Holocaust survivors who arrived in Israel were the best migrant in the history of world migration. There was not one migration better anywhere. First of all, at the demographic level, most survivors who arrived in Israel were at the right age, courtesy of Hitler. The children were murdered, old people were murdered. So those who came were at a good age from a migration point of view, and there was a predominance of male too. Now what happened was, 2/3 of the Israeli army during the War of Independence were survivors. I was brought up, like most Israelis, that the image of the Israeli soldier, Israeli fighter, was not a survivor. 2/3, according to her, were Holocaust survivors. They arrived, the war finishes in 45, in 47 they start fighting, 2 years later. And they made good soldiers. 2, in the first 2 years after the war, in medical school, half of the students studying medicine were survivors. Half of the people participating in pilot training in the Israeli Air Force are Holocaust survivors. They are 2 of the most demanding courses humanly imaginable. She's saying they contributed to medicine, they contribute to the army, they contributed to the settlement of Israel at the time. They became very good farmers, great scientists, writers, humorists. The great Israeli movie maker, Ephraim Kishon, a great humorist, made great movies, was a Hungarian Holocaust survivor. She's arguing, and she did the details, but I know the individual details, that in any area of human endeavor, the survivors have made a huge, huge contribution to Israeli life. And I'm saying it, I wanted to finish with this for a number of reasons. One, at the individual level, it fits very well with what I have argued and tried to write, that Holocaust survivors, you need to be aware of their strength, their resilience, their positive way of being in the world, as it were. And even when you are a clinician, people came to see me not because they did well, because they struggle one way or another. But you could see their struggle, their difficulties within the context of their people who have made a huge contribution to the society in which they lived, and so on. There is also and the other reason that I wanted to mention it is because I believe, I'm convinced, that the story of Israel and the contribution of the survivors to Israeli society is replicated in Australia. And I hope that somebody listening to me will do a comparable study in Australia, because they'll find that the survivors, their children and grandchildren, have made a huge contribution to Australian way of life. And the danger, of course, as a clinician, is that you talk about, and I don't want to minimize, the pain, the suffering, the guilt, the depression, the anxiety, the sleepless nights that survivors have endured. But you need to see it within the context of that there have been people who have made a huge contribution to their host country, as it were. Maybe, and at one point you asked me, what's the lesson of it all? And that was after spending the next few months thinking about your question. That's my answer.
Good one. I think that's an appropriate way to finish. Thank you very much.
Thanks.